Andy, I just said hello to you again, but it's nice to say hello again. I'm so happy to see your face.
Earl, it's
So,
great to see you, man. I'm great to connect with you on this platform and to have a conversation. We've had epic conversations in the past,
I know.
and so it's nice to we'll record one and see if it's epic. You
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Share with everybody. Yeah. Oh, that's great. No, I really, I value you as a person, a father, a husband, a pastor. It's one of those, friendships where I appreciate multifaceted Andy.
Well, thank you,
So,
Earl. You're kind. You're kind. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
let me just start by saying this. What's your story?
Mm,
And answer that question however you want.
okay. Yeah, so I'm the first of six kids. I was raised in the States in the South, and my father was an independent fundamental Baptist church pastor. And when I got into high school, he was diagnosed bipolar, so that kind of helped explain some of the things from my childhood. But he left the ministry when I was 10. He had a nervous breakdown, and that really messed with me emotionally, and I kind of stunted my emotional growth, stunted at that point, and wanted to have nothing to do with God because of what had happened to my dad. And of course, I didn't want to have anything to do with Satan either because I saw up close, how he had destroyed life. So I was in this weird place where it felt like the only thing you could do is make money. And so went through high school, got to about 19 years old, and my world started to fall apart because you can't run from God and have your parents pray for you and that kind of thing, and not try to serve Satan and then not try to serve. You're just in this weird place. So I had my own mental breakdown, and it was through that particular experience. I'm so grateful that back in those days they didn't have the medication that they have today, because it forced me to come to terms with myself and come to terms with God, and that's how I met God, was through that particular experience. So quite an exciting story, but that's kind of the nutshell of it. And then my heart was connected to the Lord after that because He saved me. I was going to die, and He saved me, rescued me, changed my mind, changed my heart towards my dad, changed my heart towards life, and got married. And then the Lord started this slow process of working on my heart about being a pastor. So like walking my way into the devil's den, all the things that had destroyed my life, now I'm like right in the middle of it. So it was really difficult. And I remember one morning, I won't tell the full story of how that happened, but one morning being in my friend, who was an associate pastor at Calvary Chapel, St. Pete, being in his office, he was also a pastor's kid, had kind of wrestled with some of the same things. And after about an hour conversation, there was tears and snot everywhere, and I was fully committing my life to whatever the Lord had for me, even ministry. And fast forward a couple more years, the Lord opened up doors so that we could move to Ottawa, Canada, from St. Petersburg, Florida, where we were at. And we moved there in 2004. And God was very gracious to us, very kind to us, blessed our ministry. We had a church there for 17 years, and it was glorious. Some of the most epic times in my life. Very, very, very fond memories of things that the Lord did. There in Ottawa through that church. Sometimes it was like riding a rocket ship. It was just incredible. And then the pandemic, the government's response to the pandemic just made it to where it was impossible for me to continue. I had a special needs kid. I was not a citizen in Canada. Wasn't going to become a citizen in Canada. Um, Most people may not know this, but you have to pledge your biological body to the crown in order to be a citizen. And of course,
Seriously.
I had already done that to Jesus, so I couldn't take it back from him and give it to the
Yeah.
Queen. So we ended up coming back to Florida, and I've been in Florida since 2021, and currently in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which is in the Panhandle of Florida. The Lord opened up doors for us to be here and to relaunch a Calvary Chapel in this town of Fort Walton Beach. So I've been here about 20 months, and it's been good. So yeah, that's a very that's like 50
Yeah.
years like in
In a
5 minutes.
nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask, what has it been like pastoring in two different countries, two
Mm,
completely different scenarios,
mm-hmm,
two very different cultures?
mm,
But you're the same man, the same God. What
mm-hmm.
what, what were the best moments and worst moments?
Mm. Yeah, so great question, Earl. And I've been talking about this a lot actually, because where I was in Ottawa was, right where the trucker convoy was. That's where our church was, and so we were kind of in the middle of that socialist, Marxist, post-Christian, anti-Christian culture there. But God had opened up doors for us in the recovery community, and then also the university community. You had students coming from all across Canada that weren't in that culture. They were Christians or from Christian families, and ended up at our church. And then we ended up with some bureaucrats, again from all kinds of places that ended up there and found our church. And uh, but that was the context. This Canadian cosmopolitan, very team oriented sort of culture, obedient culture. And I'll just be frank, I like it. I
Right.
like it a lot.
Sure.
And I think it's a great way to live. And I think I my heart still longs for Canada. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this conversation with you is just because it was the only way I was able to solace my own soul as I left Canada. Was whatever I do in the States, I wanted to make sure that it helps the church and Christians in Canada. So but here, this community is a military town. The city is bound. It's kind of landlocked by the Gulf of America on one side, and
Right.
then Eglin Air Force Base on the other side, and Hurlburt Airfield on the other side. Hurlburt is a special ops base. They run a lot of special military. Air Force runs special military operations out of that. And then Eglin is the largest land base, largest Air Force land base. It's 70 some odd miles wide. Crazy. Anyway, so the city's bound by that, kind of landlocked. So it's a military town. A lot of military people retire here,
Mm.
and then it's got this beautiful beach. One of the beautiful beaches in Florida is right here. So and it's a right wing culture.
Mm.
And of course, American and independent and military infused, lots of sarcasm. They speak sarcasm as a second language here. And, um, and of course, very American and very Trump, very pro Trump. So, uh, yeah, and good old boy sort of network in the South, and quite a bit of that. This part of Florida has been called Lower Alabama because Florida tried to give it to Alabama,
Mm.
and Alabama wouldn't take it because for them it was all swampland, and had no idea that the coast in 100 years would be extremely expensive. So
Right.
um, yeah, so very different. And the church there in Canada, in planting a church, I got to do a lot of like frontline ministry. So a lot of evangelism, a lot of personal discipleship, personal evangelism, that kind of thing. Whereas here, you plant a church, Calvary Chapel is already known. People love it. People come from all over the country, here, they're looking for a Calvary Chapel. And so very different experience because people just kind of come out of the woodwork, and they don't come, they come ready to work and ready to help and ready to jump in and ready to assimilate. So very, very different experience. So I find myself doing a lot more leadership here and a lot more administration, which isn't as much fun, but it's different. And so yeah, very, very different experience. And you say, well, why would the Lord do that? And I don't know. I think I'm too early in the story to know why He would do that. Uh, but I'm fascinated by God, and I'm fascinated by the way He works, and I'm fascinated by the way His Spirit moves
Mm.
in and among cultures. And one of the things in Canada that was fascinating to me was watching the gospel at work among the recovery community and the language that they used around the gospel. And then watching where the emphasis in the gospel was, because it was a different emphasis than what I was used to in Florida. And so for those guys, delivering, God's going to save me from hell is not as much of a hook
Right.
as God's going to save me from destroying myself.
Yeah.
It's a very different gospel message. It's the same gospel, but the emphasis is different. And then here again, different because good lives, good families, this kind of thing. So it's a little different, a different emphasis, different expression. And if I could say this, I think, here's my problem, Earl, is that I get one question and I go for 10 minutes. That's my problem.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
go for it.
But
That's
but
what this is all
he-
about.
here's the thing is that our culture has changed. I'm not sure about Canadian culture, but definitely U.S. culture has changed, signaled by the Trump election. Trump being elected didn't change the culture. The culture changed and produced the Trump election, and
Mm,
our culture is shifting in boomer culture, in the hippies and the genesis of Calvary Chapel, our culture shifted from a right-leaning culture to a left-leaning culture, and Calvary Chapel was at the genesis of that, at the opening of that, and Calvary really was able to minister through that shift in the culture, and still doing that today. But now we've shifted back to a right-leaning culture, and
mm,
so the challenge is going to be communicating to the culture where it is now, guarding against the excesses of a right-leaning culture, just in the same way that we had to guard against the excesses of a left-leaning culture. But the way that we express the gospel, the way that we teach, the way that we disciple, the way that we run churches, has got to change and got to shift a little bit with that shift in culture. Not that we're trying to be culturally relevant. We're trying to serve people and meet their needs. So
So
yeah.
you bring up something really, really interesting here. What is the difference between trying to be culturally relevant and
Mm,
being switching foot, in a practical way that helps the culture, helps the community?
yeah.
Because I know what you're doing, and I know you're not trying to be culturally relevant, but what do you see as
Right.
the difference between
Well, I think culturally relevant, I think maybe in its genesis and its beginning was probably right-hearted, in the sense of wanting to meet people where they are and tell them about Jesus and help lead them to the Lord. But what it's become is been this gross, I'm just like you, see, I'm the same, we can be friends.
the two?
And and I don't think that's right, because we are different, and Christ has made us different, and we spread the fragrance of Christ everywhere we go. And for some people, that's life, and for some people, that's death. And they react to it. So we can't get away from that. And I used to tell people, the Dalai Lama wears an orange dress, and he's relevant. So it's not like what it's not like how we dress, or it's how that you have to bring something spiritually to the conversation that's going to be different, and hopefully you bring in light in life. So I think cultural relevance has really become this sort of bad term, but that doesn't mean that we can just ignore where people are at and what their needs are, and to consider that, especially when we're ministering to them. And when I say ministering to them is really setting up the way that the church works and functions, so that it meets these needs, or at least is aware of some of these needs. And the biggest one right now is loneliness.
Mm,
Loneliness. Everybody's been atomized. The fabric of community is just shot right through in Western society. There's nothing holding the community together. It's just gone. And the way I say it is this: is that my parents aren't together,
mm,
and my grandparents aren't together.
mm.
And so why do all these young people have this loss of a sense of identity? They
Right.
don't know who they are, because there's no fabric there for them. And then
Sure.
and then beyond that, they don't know how valuable they are, because nobody's ever sacrificed for them,
Mm, wow.
right?
Wow.
And so this is the communities that we're ministering to. You say, Andy, you're just talking about young people. No, I'm talking about people in their 70s too.
Yeah.
We all live in this culture, and all of us in this culture are experiencing this profound sense of loneliness, and nihilism
Right.
is just prevalent in our culture. So if we just ignore that, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good. If I could lay one more thing onto that, Earl, talk about ministering to people. When Calvary Chapel first started and first got it going, in the shift towards left-leaning culture, the need was for good, solid Bible teaching. We had the church had been topical preaching. It had been riling people up, but
Mm,
people were in that right-leaning culture. People read the Bible at home. People had Bibles at home. They did devotions at home. But when that shift happened, it was because they didn't and they weren't. And Pastor Chuck and J. Vernon McGee and some other guys were just simply teaching the Bible to people because they had no exposure to it at all. And they were just drinking it like cold water. The problem today is that we have all of Chuck Smith from the 1980s or 1970s until he died in a
Mm.
catalog on the internet. We also have J. Vernon McGee. We have a guy on the internet reading Charles Spurgeon's sermons. We have the entire collection from Tim Keller. We have all of everything Matt Chandler's done. We've got, like name a preacher and their entire things on the Bible. So now it's like, well, I want to look up this passage and try to understand this passage. And now I've got way too many people to
Mm.
consult to think about, okay, what's going on in that passage.
Right.
So you go, on Sunday morning, do we really need, is
Mm.
that the big need? Because I'm not going to teach the best Bible study somebody's going to hear that week,
Right.
because they've got podcasts and YouTube and the Bible Project and like on and on and on and on and on. I mean, you can tune into Yale Divinity School.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is all online. And then when it comes to worship, you're like, oh, okay, well, worship. Well, I'm not gonna, we're not gonna have the best worship experience that somebody's gonna experience that week because of YouTube and Spotify. And our people are not gonna be able to compete with Chris Tomlin and uh, Phil Wickham and Bethel and Elevation and whoever you like, Maverick City, whoever you like. So when we get together, if all we're doing is singing
Mm.
and then doing a verse by verse through the Bible study,
Mm.
what are you offering people that they don't already have access to?
Yeah.
So then you have to ask yourself, well, what do they need?
Right.
And I'm not saying we're not going to sing, and I'm not saying that we're not going to study the Bible. I'm not saying that at all. But what
Mm.
I'm saying is you got all your marbles in that basket,
Yeah.
and you may be missing what people need. And if their biggest need is loneliness, and their biggest need is a sense of identity and belonging, and this sense of, man, for crying out loud, do something
Yeah.
to meet that need. So for us, what we've done, and I did this in Ottawa, and I've done this here, and it's been received really well because I think Western society is longing for this. We'll stop in the middle of singing, a couple songs into singing. I'll open up the floor and I'll direct it. I'll
Mm.
open up the floor for what we call family time. And
Mm.
we'll take 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, and let people share what God is doing in their lives. So
Oh, awesome.
answered prayer, testimony, revelation from the scripture. I ask them to be brief, keep it under 2 minutes so other people have an opportunity to share. Sometimes I'll ask if they've shared last week to just hold your peace, let somebody else, let the introverts have an opportunity to share.
Yeah.
Um, Always give some encouragement around, make sure you're giving praise to God. Make sure you're
Mm.
not drawing attention to somebody else and certainly not to yourself. Just some guidelines around there. And then we go one at a time. You raise your hand. I'll recognize you. You can have the floor. Give glory to God. And sometimes you have to coach people, God gives grace to the humble.
Mm.
And, we need to hear these things. But it orients the church two ways. It orients the church to recognizing God at work throughout the week,
Mm.
and then it also orients us towards each other, that the
Yeah.
professional at the front that's getting paid has all the answers and all. No, this lady, okay, I heard a testimony yesterday. This guy had a brain tumor, and
Mm.
in a prayer meeting somebody prayed for him and God healed him of the brain tumor, and now he doesn't have it anymore, and documented that well, I want to hear that story. you
Yeah.
know and
Yeah.
then I want to hear the story of something in the hospital, or I want to hear the story of something financial, or I want to hear the story of some. So we had a couple of weeks ago, this mom raised her hand and she goes, I have to get up and share because my daughter's sitting next to me and she's elbowing me. She's like 12 years old. She's like, Mom, you have something to share. Mom, you need to say it. Well, I don't want to say that here. No, Mom, this is the time you have to say it.
Yeah.
And so she got up and shared what the Lord had done in her life.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, and then when you come back and sing, like the whole church is now, you're not thinking about yourself.
Right.
You're thinking about how amazing God is and
Mm.
how he is actually at work in this church.
Yeah.
And I see him in the people that are around him. And so sometimes you get testimonies that are sort of multi-month testimonies, because people are keeping you up to date on what's going on. And, oh, the Lord did this, or, oh, the Lord did that. And we had one this past Sunday, visitors stood up and gave a
Mm.
testimony. And that was that they had met this guy kind of randomly. They're here on vacation. They had met this guy randomly twice through the week
Mm.
and had gospel conversations with him. And then they decided, oh, let's go to church while we're here in town. Let's go to this church over here. So as they were walking up to the front door of our church, Well, here comes this guy that they had run into twice throughout the week in gospel
Oh,
conversations. He was walking up the door at the same time, and it was his first time to visit this church, kind of just, well, I'll just go see what's going on here. And so they met there right at the entrance of the church, and they're going, obviously, God is doing something right here in this moment, and he wants to do something this morning in this building with us. So when they share that in family time, well, there's chills that goes out through the whole congregation because God is going, look, you guys have no idea what I'm doing.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you
And
don't
I
know.
believe that's one of those beautiful things about belonging, right? Is when we get out of the way of the Holy Spirit and we just allow His people to share what He's been doing in their
Yeah,
lives. Like
yeah,
what a beautiful testimony from you, even how that's valuable. Because
yeah,
you're right. Like we're inundated by information
right,
these
right,
days, and I'm not
right,
saying that's a bad thing. But it
right,
isn't, and it
right.
changes our jobs very much. So
Yeah,
200 years ago.
yep.
And so now the church is no longer the hub for connection in a spiritual sense. It's really, it should be the hub for people,
Yeah.
to gather. And I think we got to get back to that Acts 2 model where they were praying the prayers, breaking the bread together, sharing, right? Like I
Those
think
four
until,
things. Yeah,
yeah, and until we get back to that, then we are just a corporate venture,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, those four things have to happen on Sunday morning, I think. And I think we've changed our Sunday morning church service to be outreach and evangelism
mm,
instead of like, no, this is when we as the church family get together. Like we're
right.
all here.
Mm,
Let's do stuff we like to do, which is
yeah,
what? Sing, share with each other, study the scriptures, and pray for each other. Let's do those things. And if a non-believer is here, are they going to hear the gospel? Yeah. Are they going to have an opportunity to respond? Yeah, 100%. But it's also no false advertising. This is
right.
who we are. This is what
Yeah.
we do, and this is what we love. And
Mm,
and we're inviting you into this community,
wow.
of people love. It's the only thing that's going to rebuild Western society because
Mm,
all the institutions are deconstructed.
yeah.
And so the only hope for Western society is families, and then right after that, it's going to be churches, and it's
Yeah.
churches that are a community. Yeah. So
Now, you mentioned a word there that I think is interesting expanding on, the deconstruction. Now, that
yeah,
is a very popular one that's been floating around for a while now.
yeah.
What do you think about people that are deconstructing their faith,
I
and
think we're
where
at
do you
the end
think
of
it
it.
comes from?
I
Yeah.
think we're at the end of it. Yeah, I think it's over. I think people have done it. I think if somebody's deconstructing now, I think you just kind of have to reckon with the reality that lots of people have already done it,
Mm,
and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. Some things need to be deconstructed. Something needs to be examined. I definitely in those years that I was describing earlier with my life. I mean, definitely thinking through why am I doing this? Francis Schaeffer famously
mm,
deconstructed, and the result was his book Escape from Reason. And so it's something I think that's normal and natural. We just had a lot of people do it at once.
mm,
But I think we're at the end of deconstruction as far as a movement within Western society. And I think the question that's now in our culture is, how do I build a life? How do I
mm,
build a good life?
mm,
How do I build a good marriage? How do I build a good family? How do I build a good career? Because if I've been given this life, I want to make something good out of it, and I want it to be worth and worthwhile. Is there a way to do it? And I think people are looking around. And I think this is why nihilism is in the culture, because that's
mm,
the other option. Is like it just doesn't matter, so let's just burn it all to the ground. But I think there's a lot of people who are like, no, 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 I want to have a good life.
right.
I don't want to die at 32 in a
Yeah.
gutter, you
Yeah.
know? Uh,
Like
so,
there's
and I
got to be
think,
more than this. There has to be more than this.
and I think, I think Jordan Peterson is done a great job. Not that all the things that he's saying is the answer, but I think he's done a great job of capturing that mood and saying to people, well, this is what you've got to do. And if you don't do this, you're going to die.
Mm,
It's just like this stark dad conversation, like
yeah.
put your shoulders back, make your bed, clean your room, and
Yeah.
and face the world, kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's
It's
just,
all about the lobster.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's caught in our culture, especially young men. and
Mm,
and so I think for us as churches and ministers, it is this little bit of a shift that says, uh I don't have to criticize everything.
mm,
I need to speak life, and this is what you need to do to live a good life and to build a good life. And I mean, that's some introspection there for a pastor to says, do you have a good life? Like, what is the shape of your marriage? What is the shape of your family and your children? What are your daily disciplines and daily habits? Do you need to take testosterone? Do you need to lose weight? Do you need to learn to exercise? Are you making your bed? Like, is your life an example to follow, or are you a slob? And you just need to own up to it. You're a lazy slob and just need to own up to it. But I don't think that's what Jesus saved you for.
Mm,
Paul says, I discipline my body,
mm.
so that I can preach the gospel and not be, I'm messing up that verse because I'm not remembering because I'm 52. But the one that sticks with me is, we proclaim him, warning and teaching every man, so that we may present every man perfect in Christ, or mature in Christ. To this I labor with all the energy he so powerfully supplies to me. Like, you don't talk about a life verse or a verse for a pastor. It's like, no, we're aiming not for a nice church service. I'm aiming to raise up leaders and to mold and shape the next generation. And I'm doing that with everything I got, you
Yeah,
know. Um,
right on.
yeah. Well, it's fun talking to you, Earl. It's good
Yeah,
questions.
oh, I love this. Thank you. So, like, from a fatherhood point of view, how has, I mean, and again, these transitions and everything like that, like everything I see on your X account and everything I read from from anything that you write down, it just always strikes me that you're an intentional dad. You really
Yeah.
are, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that about you. So, what does that look like in the light of living the life of ministry you're talking
Well, it's because of pain. It's come because of
about?
pain, right? And so lots of people had painful fatherhood experiences. I talked a little bit about that. My dad was bipolar. So there's pain that's there. And God was very gracious to me as a young person growing up, because it was actually through the church, Earl, that I got
Mm,
to meet good men, and there were good men that were kind enough to speak into my life and to shape me and to serve as a good example, for me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much from those guys. But it was the church. It's the only way that a messed up person has a shot at a good life, is by being part of a church. We were at a pastors conference this past week. I brought a bunch of people with me, and I watched at the supper table, a couple of meals. We're out at a restaurant supper table, and there's a guy in our church who's an executive, vice president of a military manufacturing company, uh, executive in every
mm,
sense of the word.
mm,
And sitting across the table from him is a young man, hasn't been to college or university yet, trying to get his life sorted, loves the Lord, wants to move out in ministry, doesn't know what he doesn't know, but asking all the right questions. And there is no other venue in the world that young man, from his home, from his family, from his parents' marriage, would have an opportunity to interact with somebody who's an executive that runs things to a T. And he needs that. And to have supper with him, that guy doesn't have supper with anybody.
right.
You know what I mean? But to
Yeah.
be able to have casual conversation and to have this sort of sense of the executive looking at him and going, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to watch over your life, and I'm
Wow.
going to speak to you. I'm going to say things that are truth because I love you and I care about you. I'm not going to be mean to you.
Mm,
Things around me grow or they die. One of the
right.
two,
Right.
is a good farmer. So, yeah, so I'm grateful for the church, but it's also pain because of my childhood, but also because I have a special needs kid.
Hmm.
And you see those qualifications in for ministry of a pastor, and they're all family based. They're all dad based. They're
Yeah.
all defense based. They're all husbandman based, in the sense that your value is based on how things grow around you.
Yeah.
And so I've got this special needs kid that's struggling in life, struggle, can't figure it out, can't figure it out. And
Mm,
so countless hours praying, asking God not to heal her, yes, 100% to heal her, but right after that, Lord, give me understanding, give me insight, give me wisdom.
yeah.
How can I help this kid? How can I bless this kid? How can I help this kid make the best life possible? And that this kid is not a burden to us. This kid is a blessing to us, but I don't know how yet.
Right.
I don't know how yet. And but then on the other side, I've got other children, and they're just like the opposite extreme. I mind blowing. Kind of where they're at in life. But I have a responsibility to both of them. And I just saw early on. I feel like, I don't know if somebody told me or the Lord told me or whatever. But it's just like, if I'll invest in my family and if I'll invest in my children, it will have an exponential effect in the ministry.
Right.
Because you don't get to pick your kids.
Mm,
God picks them.
Mm.
And, we got all these church planners that want to pick the people in their church. Like, no, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
He brings weird, messed up people to you for you to love and to tell the truth. And if you do a good job, he'll bring more weird, messed up people to you
Yeah.
to love and to tell the truth, and so it's, the whole mechanism of growth, Ephesians chapter 4, the whole mechanism of growth is speaking the truth in love.
Right.
Nobody does that good.
Mm.
Everybody has to work at that, but that is the mechanism of growth. And
Yeah.
uh, all right, ran out of that one. Yeah, yeah. So that's why I'm so big on dad ministry. I think the Catholics got it right, by calling some of the
Mm.
guys father, even though you're not supposed to call him father. But
Yeah.
that's, Jesus said, don't call him any father. But that really is a lot of the ministry, is just being a dad. And
Absolutely.
if I could just add one thing onto that, there's a book that James Dobson wrote years ago called Life on the Edge,
Mm.
and he said it was the book that he said it was his most important book, and he said it was the most important book, and it's a book written for young adults, 14, 16 to 22, 23, and it's to help them make that bridge into adulthood. And there's all these decisions that they need to make about their life
Mm.
uh, in those years, and he just kind of gives them some coaching on how to make those decisions.
Mm.
And I almost always give that to whoever it is that is in my orbit, that's on their way to ministry or discipleship or leadership. Almost always, and I look at them and I go, 97% of what I say is encapsulated in this book.
Right.
And this you're making that transition into adulthood. That's being a dad.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyway. Life on the Edge, James Dobson.
That's an awesome one, and it's so true. I mean, working in the downtown east side of Vancouver and spending some years down there, sitting on sidewalks, I can say with complete confidence that so many of those stories, like 70% of them that I heard, were from foster care that didn't know their fathers. And that role of a dad is just, it's vital. And I think what happens, and I know for me, because I didn't have a great earthly father,
Right.
um, uh, when I became a Christian, my first hurdle was to try and see that God, as my father, is not cool and distant and abusive.
Mm,
That was my
mm.
first hurdle
Yep.
to accept that.
Yep.
Okay, when I say, my father, I need to say
Yeah.
that sense that this is something new, different, eternal, loving.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people struggle with that. And as
Mm-hmm.
pastors, like,
Mm-hmm.
we inherit the relationships people have with their moms
Mm-hmm.
and dads, whether it's good or
Mm-hmm.
bad.
That's right.
And so we need to navigate those waters carefully, because it's
Mm-hmm.
very seated wounds there. And M. Peterson talks
Mm-hmm.
about
Yep.
the parental wound. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Quite a bit too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
John Eldridge did a lot of work on that, with
yeah,
the father
yeah,
wound.
yeah.
And then Louis Giglio's got a book out this last year. I think it's a reprint of an older book, but again, about dads and the importance of dads and fathers. And yeah,
Yeah,
100%, 100%, Earl. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Well, I think if it's okay with you, let's bookmark this for a later conversation another time. Because I know you've got a friend coming, and
Yeah.
I wanted to say, Andy, like, I've really, like, we've been walking this. I think I met you in 2004. I'm pretty sure it's been
Yep.
that. And
Yeah.
so, like, we've been walking this road, and I've observed how you've just consistently made decisions toward Jesus inside your family, outside your family, inside church. And it's like, I want you to know that you've been a complete influence,
Mm,
over a lot of things that I've gone through. And there's even
mm.
times where you would say something that, to some may seem like, there was one conversation we had about Calvary Chapel and mentoring and stuff like that. And you were just like, you know what, people want it, they're going to go get it. And I was like, wow, he's right. And it's like, sometimes you just speak simply like that, but it's like, it hits deep, it hits hard. And that was years ago that you said that, but I haven't
Yeah.
lost it. So I appreciate that. And
Can I tell you where I got that? Can I tell you where I got that? Because you'll love this story.
no.
I had an elder who was a real estate agent, and I rode with him in his BMW one day, just hanging out with him one day, right, while he was doing his work. And this is the way he would check his voicemail. He would listen to the voicemail. He'd listen to the person on the voicemail for like the first 3 or 4 seconds. His name was Glenn. Hey, Glenn, it's such and such, such. I need blah, 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 blah. Delete. And I go, you're not going to call him back? He goes, no. Why would I call him back? I have something he needs. He has to call me back. If you have something I want, I'm going to call you. I'm going to show up at your house.
Yep.
I'm going to get what I need
Wow.
because that's how it works.
There's a truth bomb for you right there.
Delete.
Oh, that's
So I
amazing.
knew after that, if I didn't get him on the phone, it was not going to be, hey, Glenn, call me back. No, it was like, okay, I'll call you back. Okay, I'll call you back. Okay, I'll call you back.
Awesome. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay. So one quick last question. Um, if Jesus was standing with you right now, what would you say to him?
I'd hug him. I'd
Right.
hug him.
No
Yeah,
words.
I'd hug
Yeah.
him. It's
Yeah.
just say thank you, man. Like, just thank you. Like, yeah, I'd hug him and say thank you.
Yeah.
And and yeah, I'd probably start crying too. Well, 100% I'd be crying. 100% I'd crying. Just saying thank you. And yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. That's a great question. In some senses, like he promised to never leave us and never forsake us because he is right here with us. And so he is that nonchalant presence with us.
Mhm.
And even when we don't recognize it. And I he's a romantic, so he likes to pop in and do wonderful things sometimes to tease us and
Sure.
to get our attention. But yeah, 100%, man, just hug and say thank you. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
Earl,
All right.
thanks, man.
Be at peace. I hope to talk to you very soon.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks,
Okay.
Earl. Ciao.
Love you.